You know that feeling when you walk into a room and you can immediately sense it? That subtle shift in energy, like the air itself gets heavier. You're at work, maybe it's a team meeting, or perhaps you're at a social gathering with people you thought were friends. And there's that person. They smile at you, they engage in conversation, they seem supportive on the surface, but something feels off. You can't quite put your finger on it at first, but deep in your gut, something is screaming at you that this person is dangerous. Not dangerous in the obvious way, not the person who openly insults you or challenges you directly. No, this is far more insidious. This is the person who operates in shadows, who positions themselves as your ally while systematically dismantling your status brick by brick. And here's the worst part. By the time you realize what's happening, you've already dropped several levels in the social hierarchy. Your reputation has taken hits you didn't even see coming. People who used to respect you now seem uncertain about you. Opportunities that should have been yours went to someone else. And you're left there, confused, asking yourself what the hell just happened. How did I go from being respected to being marginalized? How did I lose ground without even realizing I was in a battle? If you've ever felt this, if you've ever experienced that sickening realization that someone in your circle has been quietly working against you while pretending to be on your side, then you need to understand something fundamental about social hierarchy. There are 3 specific personality types that exist in every social ecosystem, whose entire function, whether conscious or unconscious, is to drag other people down. They are parasites in the hierarchy, and they target one specific type of person more than any other. They target people who are rising, people who have potential, people who threaten their position simply by existing and improving. And the most dangerous part is that these personality types have perfected the art of camouflage. They don't announce themselves. They don't wear signs. They integrate themselves into your life, into your workspace, into your social circles, and they begin their work silently. Today, I'm going to show you exactly who these 3 types are, how to identify them before they can do damage, and most importantly, how to neutralize their influence and protect your position in any hierarchy you're part of. Because once you see these patterns, once you understand the mechanics of how status predators operate, you become almost immune to their tactics. Let's start with a fundamental truth about social hierarchies that most people either don't understand or refuse to accept. Every single social structure you're part of, your workplace, your friend group, your family, even your online communities, operates as a hierarchy. There are people at the top who command respect, attention, and resources. There are people in the middle who are stable but unremarkable, and there are people at the bottom who are struggling for basic recognition. This isn't a judgment. It's not about morality or worth as a human being. It's simply the reality of how human social structures have organized themselves for hundreds of thousands of years. Robert Greene talks about this extensively in the 48 Laws of Power when he discusses the law of never outshining the master. The hierarchy is not just about formal positions or titles. It's about perceived value, social capital, and the invisible currency of respect. And here's what you need to understand. The hierarchy is never static. It's always in motion. People are always rising or falling, sometimes rapidly, sometimes gradually. And the 3 personality types I'm about to reveal to you have one thing in common. They cannot rise on their own merit, so they rise by pulling others down. They are not builders, they are saboteurs. They don't create value, they destroy it in others to make themselves look better by comparison. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He wrote about how in any court, in any power structure, there will always be those who advance through virtue and those who advance through treachery. The treacherous ones are more dangerous because they hide behind the mask of friendship and support. The first personality type you need to watch out for is what I call the subtle underminer. This person is perhaps the most dangerous of the 3 because they operate with surgical precision and perfect deniability. The subtle underminer never attacks you directly. They would never openly criticize you or challenge you in front of others. In fact, they often position themselves as your supporter, your friend, sometimes even your mentor. But pay attention to what actually happens when they're around. The subtle underminer has mastered the art of the backhanded compliment, the damning with faint praise, and the strategic planting of doubt. Here's how it works in practice. You're in a meeting and you present an idea. It's a good idea, people are nodding, there's positive energy in the room. The subtle underminer waits. They don't jump in immediately because that would be too obvious. They wait until the initial enthusiasm settles and then they speak up. They say something like, I think that's actually a really interesting approach. It's definitely creative. I'm just wondering if we've thought through all the potential complications. Like, I can see some risks here that might be worth considering before we commit to this direction. Notice what just happened. They didn't say your idea was bad. They didn't directly oppose it. They simply introduced doubt. They planted a seed of uncertainty that now everyone in the room is thinking about. And the most insidious part is that they framed it as thoughtful consideration, as if they're helping you avoid potential pitfalls. But what they've actually done is shift the entire energy of the room from enthusiasm about your idea to concern about potential problems. Your status in that moment just took a hit. You went from the person with the innovative solution to the person who maybe didn't think things through carefully enough. The subtle underminer does this consistently, across multiple contexts, always in small doses so that no single instance seems significant. They might mention in casual conversation to a colleague that they're a little concerned about your stress levels lately, planting the idea that you might not be handling your responsibilities well. They might praise your work, but always with a qualifier. You did a great job on that project. Considering the circumstances, that's really impressive. What circumstances? Why does there need to be a qualifier? Because the qualifier reduces the absolute value of the praise. They might volunteer information about your past mistakes or struggles when introducing you to new people, framed as context but actually functioning as a status-lowering device. This is Sarah. She's been with the company for 5 years. She had a rough patch a couple years ago, but she's really bounced back. Now everyone who meets Sarah for the first time has been primed to see her as someone who struggled, someone who had to bounce back, rather than simply as a competent professional. Over time, these small cuts accumulate. Your reputation develops invisible wounds. People start to have vague negative associations with you that they can't quite articulate. You become the person who's good but, who's talented however, who's capable except. And the subtle underminer maintains their position as your supporter the entire time. They can point to dozens of instances where they praised you, where they were in your corner. The fact that every single piece of support came with a poison pill attached is almost impossible to prove or call out without seeming paranoid or defensive. Before we go further, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with yourself. How many times have you been in a situation where someone you thought was on your side said something about you that made you feel smaller? Not an obvious insult, not an attack, but something that left you feeling diminished, uncertain, like maybe you're not as capable as you thought you were. Maybe it was a comment about your work that seemed supportive, but somehow made you doubt yourself. Maybe it was the way they talked about you to others, always with that little addition that took away from your accomplishments. If you've experienced this, if you know exactly what I'm talking about, I want you to leave a comment right now and just write, "I've felt this." That's it. Just those 3 words. Because here's what happens when you do that. You realize you're not alone in this. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of people watching this video right now who have been in the exact same position, who have trusted someone only to slowly realize that person was working against them the whole time. And when you see other people commenting the same thing, when you see that you're not the only one who's experienced this, that feeling of confusion and self-doubt starts to lose its power, because you understand that this isn't about you being weak or paranoid. This is about a specific type of person who operates in a specific way, and once you can name it, once you can see the pattern, they lose their ability to affect you. So go ahead, write in the comments, "I've felt this, and let's build some awareness together." Because your comment might be exactly what someone else needs to see today to realize they're not crazy, they're not imagining things, they're just dealing with a subtle underminer. The second personality type that will drag you down the hierarchy is what I call the credit thief. Unlike the subtle underminer who damages your reputation through strategic doubt, the credit thief operates by directly stealing your social capital and your achievements. These people are experts at positioning themselves to absorb the recognition that should go to others, and they do it in ways that are maddeningly difficult to confront, without looking petty or insecure. Here's how the credit thief operates. They insert themselves into your projects, your ideas, your successes, not necessarily to help, but to create association. They want to be present enough that when the success comes, they can claim partial or even full ownership. Let me paint you a specific picture. You've been working on a complex problem for weeks. You've done the research, you've tested different approaches, you've finally cracked it. You're excited. You mention your breakthrough to a colleague. That colleague is a credit thief, though you don't know it yet. They listen with apparent interest, they ask questions, they seem genuinely engaged. A few days later, in a larger meeting with leadership present, the topic comes up. The credit thief speaks up. They present your solution, but here's the key detail. They present it using the word "we." So we've been looking into this problem, and we think the best approach is, they've now created a verbal association between themselves and your work. If anyone asks for clarification, they might even graciously mention that you and I have been collaborating on this, which is technically true in the sense that you spoke to them about it, but completely false in terms of who actually did the work and created the solution. The most sophisticated credit thieves don't even steal credit overtly. They simply position themselves in the communication flow between you and the people who matter. They become the person who brings things to leadership's attention, who coordinates the team's efforts, who synthesizes everyone's contributions. And in doing so, they become the face of the work in the minds of decision-makers. When promotion time comes, when new opportunities arise, leadership thinks of the credit thief because the credit thief has been the visible representative of success, even though the actual work was done by others. This personality type is particularly prevalent in corporate environments, but they exist everywhere. In friend groups, they're the person who retells your stories as if they happened to them. In creative fields, they're the person who takes your concept and runs with it, filing off your name in the process. In families, they're the sibling who takes credit for caring for aging parents when you're doing the actual daily work. And here's why they're so effective at dragging you down the hierarchy, because success in most hierarchies isn't just about doing good work, it's about being perceived as doing good work. The credit thief understands that perception is reality in social hierarchies. If they can control the narrative about who contributed what, they can rise while you stagnate, even though your actual output and value far exceeds theirs. Robert Greene would call this a violation of Law 7. Get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit. The credit thief has internalized this law completely, and they apply it ruthlessly. The tragedy is that the people being stolen from often don't even realize it's happening until it's too late. They're so focused on doing excellent work that they neglect the equally important task of ensuring that work is correctly attributed to them. The third and final personality type, and in many ways the most destructive, is the chaos agent. This person doesn't necessarily want to rise in the hierarchy themselves. Their primary drive is to prevent anyone else from rising, especially anyone they perceive as a threat. The chaos agent operates by creating interpersonal drama, spreading conflicting information, generating distrust, and generally destabilizing any environment they're part of. Where the subtle underminer uses doubt and the credit thief uses attribution manipulation, the chaos agent uses pure disruption. They are the person who always seems to be in the middle of conflicts, but never quite responsible for them. They're the one who comes to you with concerns about what someone else said about you. They're the one who tells different people different versions of the same story, and then watches as the contradictions create conflict. They're the one who asks inflammatory questions in meetings designed to create division. I'm just curious. Does anyone else feel like the workload isn't being distributed fairly here? Now everyone in the meeting is looking around suspiciously, wondering if they're doing too much or too little, wondering if others resent them. The chaos agent thrives in environments of uncertainty and conflict because those environments prevent anyone from establishing stable status. If everyone is constantly defending themselves, dealing with interpersonal drama, and trying to figure out who said what about whom, no one has the bandwidth to actually excel and rise. This serves the chaos agent's purpose perfectly. They maintain their position by ensuring no one else can gain stable ground. Here's what makes the chaos agent particularly dangerous. They often have an intuitive understanding of social dynamics and emotional manipulation. They know exactly which buttons to push, which insecurities to activate, which conflicts to amplify. They might tell you that they heard your manager expressing doubts about your commitment to the team. When you, understandably concerned, bring this up with your manager has no idea what you're talking about. Now you look paranoid or overly sensitive. The chaos agent has successfully damaged your relationship with your manager while maintaining a complete deniability. They were just trying to give you a heads up. They were just concerned. They thought you should know. The chaos agent also loves to position themselves as the sympathetic ear, the person everyone comes to with their problems and complaints. This gives them information, leverage. They know who's frustrated with whom, who's insecure about what, who's competing with whom. And they use this information strategically to keep conflicts simmering, to prevent alliances from forming, to ensure that the social environment remains fragmented and unstable. In corporate settings, the chaos agent is the person who seems to have their finger on the pulse of office politics, but somehow every conversation with them leaves you feeling more confused and paranoid than before. In friend groups, they're the person who's always stirring the pot, bringing up old grievances, making sure no one gets too comfortable or too close. In families, they're the one who ensures that family gatherings always involve some drama, some conflict that keeps everyone walking on eggshells. Machiavelli would recognize the chaos agent as someone who has learned that in a disordered state, the mediocre can thrive because excellence cannot establish itself. They are agents of disorder by design, and they will fight against anyone trying to bring stability, clarity, or meritocracy to the environment. Now that you can identify these three types, the subtle underminer, the credit thief, and the chaos agent, the question becomes, what do you do about them? How do you protect yourself and your position in the hierarchy when you're surrounded by people actively working to pull you down? The first and most critical step is emotional detachment from the need for these people's approval or understanding. This is harder than it sounds because we're socially conditioned to want harmony, to want everyone to like us, to want to clear up misunderstandings. But here's the truth. You cannot negotiate with status predators. You cannot explain yourself into their good graces. You cannot win them over with better work or more transparency. Their agenda is not based on misunderstanding you. It's based on needing you to be lower than them in the hierarchy. No amount of explanation or demonstration of your good intentions will change that fundamental drive. When you accept this, when you truly internalize that these people are not operating in good faith, you free yourself from the exhausting and futile effort of trying to win them over. Your energy, which was being drained in defensive maneuvers, becomes available for strategic offense. The second step is documentation and visibility. The subtle underminer relies on your accomplishments being ambiguous or easily qualified. The credit thief relies on attribution being unclear. The chaos agent relies on everything being he said, she said, with no clear record. You counter all three by creating clear, documented evidence of your work and your contributions. This doesn't mean you become the office bureaucrat who CCs everyone on everything. It means you strategically ensure that important contributions you make are visible to the people who matter. When you solve a problem, you don't just solve it quietly and move on. You create a brief written summary of the problem, your approach, and the outcome, and you share it with relevant stakeholders. When you're in meetings where decisions are being made or ideas are being developed, you follow up with a written summary. Just wanted to recap what we discussed today and confirm next steps. This creates a paper trail that makes it much harder for credit thieves to steal attribution and much harder for subtle underminers to revise history about who contributed what. For the chaos agent, documentation is even more powerful. When they come to you with concerns about what someone supposedly said, you can simply say, "That's interesting, I'd love to hear more about that. Can you send me an email with the details so I can address it properly?" Watch how quickly they backpedal. Chaos agents hate documentation because it creates accountability, and they need to operate in the ambiguous space where everything is just conversation and nothing can be pinned down. The third strategy is strategic alliance building. One of the reasons these three personality types succeed is that they often target isolated individuals. Someone who's talented but doesn't have strong social connections in the hierarchy is a perfect victim. They can be undermined, have credit stolen from them, or be embroiled in chaos without anyone noticing or caring enough to intervene. Your defense is to make yourself less isolated. This doesn't mean you need to become a social butterfly or engage in fake friendships. It means you identify people in your environment who operate with integrity, who are also focused on rising through merit rather than sabotage, and you build genuine relationships with them. You help them when you can, you acknowledge their contributions, you create reciprocal goodwill. When you have allies who respect you and understand your value, the Subtle Underminers whisper campaign becomes less effective because people who know you well will dismiss the subtle doubts. The credit thief's attempts to steal attribution become more difficult because others who witnessed your work can confirm it. The chaos agent's attempts to isolate you in drama fail because you have people who will give you straight information and honest feedback instead of manipulation. This is Sun Tzu's principle applied to social hierarchy. Know your terrain and secure your supply lines. Your supply lines are your relationships with people who will support you not out of obligation, but out of genuine mutual respect. The fourth and perhaps most advanced technique is what I call strategic non-reaction. When the subtle underminer takes a shot at you in a meeting, your instinct might be to defend yourself, to explain, to counter their implied criticism. Don't. When you react defensively, you validate their frame. You accept the premise that there's something to defend against. Instead, you can simply acknowledge and move forward without engaging the substance of their doubt. They say, "I can see some risks here that might be worth considering before we commit to this direction." You respond calmly, "All approaches have considerations. I've evaluated the primary ones and believe this is the strongest path forward. Happy to discuss specific concerns offline if anyone has them." You've acknowledged that considerations exist, which is obviously true for any decision, but you haven't accepted their frame that your idea is risky or poorly thought through. You've reframed it as your idea being the strongest option and invited specific discussion rather than vague doubt. Then you move forward. When the credit thief tries to use we language about your work, you can calmly and factually correct the record without making it emotional. "Actually, I developed this approach. Happy to walk through my process if anyone wants more detail." No anger, no accusation of theft, just a clear factual statement. If they persist, "Well, we were discussing it together," you can say, "Yes, I shared my completed work with you last week. The development of it was my project over the previous month." Again, factual, calm, clear. When the chaos agent comes to you with gossip or inflammatory information, you can simply refuse to engage with it. I appreciate you mentioning that, but I prefer to address concerns directly with the people involved rather than discuss them secondhand. If there's an issue, I'm sure they'll bring it to me. This completely shuts down their game. They need you to take the bait, to get emotional, to confront the other person based on their information. When you refuse, they have no move. There's also a deeper level of work here that goes beyond tactics and strategies. This is about fundamentally changing how you relate to hierarchy and status. Most people who get dragged down by these three personality types have an unconscious belief that hierarchy position should be based purely on merit, and that if they just do excellent work, they'll naturally rise. This belief is naive, and it makes you vulnerable. The reality is that all hierarchies, every single one in human history, involve both merit and politics. The question is never whether politics is involved. The question is whether you're going to be unconscious of the political dimension and thus vulnerable to those who exploit it, or whether you're going to become conscious and competent in navigating it. This doesn't mean you have to become manipulative or underhanded yourself. It means you recognize that protecting your position and ensuring your contributions are properly recognized is a legitimate part of professional and social life. It means you accept that there are people who will try to use you as a stepping stone, and you develop the awareness and skills to prevent that without guilt or apology. The internal shift required here is from seeing yourself as purely a producer of value to seeing yourself as both a producer and a protector of that value. You create, and you also ensure that what you create is attributed to you and benefits you. This is not selfish. This is basic self-preservation in a competitive hierarchy. Let me give you a practical challenge for the next 7 days. I want you to do 3 specific things. First, identify one person in your current primary hierarchy, whether that's work, social circle, or family, who might fit one of these 3 patterns. You don't have to confront them, just identify them. Notice their patterns. Watch how they operate with you and with others. Build your awareness. Second, pick one area where you've been producing value without ensuring proper visibility or attribution, and fix that. Create some form of documentation or communication that makes your contribution clear. This might be uncomfortable at first. You might feel like you're bragging or